Tonight at 10, Boris Johnson admits there are problems within British policing after the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving officer. But he says the public should still trust the police. The Prime Minister also said her death was sickening and described the justice system as a nightmare for women.
There is one area where I think the issue of trust needs to be addressed square on, and it's in the way we handle crimes against women and girls.
Mr Johnson says he's absolutely standing by the head of the Met Police despite calls for her to resign. Also tonight, millions of households face higher energy bills as the price cap on gas and electricity charges is raised. The growing numbers of girls forced to join criminal gangs through rape and intimidation. We have a special report. No sign of cooling down. The La Palma volcano forces thousands more to flee.
Nobody knows how much more lava is going to flow into the sea. There's no sign of this ending anytime soon.
And it's back. The London Marathon returns on Sunday.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News channel, a place at an Old Trafford final awaits for St Helens or Leeds as they bid to meet the Catalans Dragons in the Super League Grand Final.
Good evening. Boris Johnson is urging the public to trust the police after the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving officer. But he did admit there are problems that need fixing and that the government would act to restore confidence. He says the justice system is snarled up with too few prosecutions and too few successful convictions for rape. The Prime Minister also says he's absolutely standing by the head of the Metropolitan Police, Dame Cressida Dick, despite calls for her to resign. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford.
Wayne Couzens, the police officer turned killer who has so damaged public trust, today beginning the life sentence in prison from which he will never be released. His abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard using his police warrant card and handcuffs risk undermining confidence in officers right across the UK.
I think it's very important that people should have confidence in policing and what the police do, and I do. Let me stress that. But what I want to do is to use this moment to make sure that we deal with what I think is a huge and justified feeling by millions of people up and down the country, and I'm afraid overwhelmingly women, that their complaints and their anxieties are not taken seriously enough by the police.
The wider problem is illustrated by a WhatsApp group in which Wayne Couzens swapped misogynistic messages with officers from the Metropolitan Police, the Civil Nuclear Constabulary and the Norfolk Constabulary. All are being investigated for gross misconduct. Two of the Met officers face a criminal investigation for allegedly sending grossly offensive messages.
I am so sorry.
Couzens' horrific crimes have left the head of London's police force, Dame Cressida Dick, in a precarious position. Her force had failed to link Wayne Couzens to at least 2 incidents of indecent exposure, one before he joined the force and one just 3 days before he killed Sarah Everard. Women who now feel concerned when stopped by officers are being advised to ask to speak to the control room on the police radio, and if still concerned, just run. But Labour want to hear more on what the police will be doing.
What we need right now is clear communication to women who are particularly concerned, not about what they have to do differently, but what the police are going to do to reassure them about the way that they're going to police this situation.
She's ready to take action, to do the right thing.
And while the force has been celebrating 100 years of women in policing, some former officers have said misogyny, contempt for women, is widespread and people are afraid to report it.
There are some people who challenge and they become marginalised and they become almost like the pariahs of the team. That needs to stop. That's where I talk about there needs to be the support network, and those officers need to be actively encouraged to come forward.
The confidence issues go far beyond the capital. The force in Manchester has been repeatedly criticised for how it handles domestic abuse. Young women in the city today said they have lost trust in the police.
I think they're there to keep you safe, and the idea that they're not and they're doing quite the opposite is quite scary, I feel.
I don't feel like I go to the police now. I feel like, we have to kind of stand together rather than go to the police. We have to kind of have backup from other means.
The senior officer who will lead the national effort to address those concerns said this is a watershed moment.
I think this is a marked moment in society to stand and look at ourselves about the level of violence against women and girls. I think this is a tide that has turned, and a tide that we can look at, not just in policing, but across society.
And the case of Sarah Everard, murdered by a police officer as she walked home, might also be the moment when forces have to address the toxic attitudes that some men in their ranks hold towards women. And no one underestimates the challenge, Clive. There is a sexist culture in some parts of policing, and that can turn into misogyny, and it can affect the outcome of cases. But the issue of violence against women is on the agenda of all the major political parties and all UK police forces. So with the right resourcing, it should be possible to both reduce misogyny and, crucially, increase the number of cases of violence against women that go through the courts. Clive.
OK, Daniel, thank you for that. Daniel Sanford there. Energy bills are set to rise substantially in England, Wales and Scotland because the energy price cap, which limits the maximum amount households pay for gas and electricity, has been raised. Around 15 of the UK's 28 million households are affected, with bills rising by about £137 on average per year. Those on standard variable tariffs or on prepaid meters will be hit. The cause is a huge jump in global wholesale gas prices, with concerns low-income families will be worst affected. Here's our Consumer Affairs correspondent, Coletta Smith.
This sort of course helps people to think about things that will help them on their low income.
Things are already tight for Debbie.
New clothes.
The last thing she needs is higher bills, but that's exactly what's happening.
It's scary, because you can't afford to live day by day as it is, and then everything else going up. You know, you think, where's the extra money coming from?
You know how much you've got coming in.
Yeah.
And then
there's twice as much that's got to go out, so it doesn't make sense. It's stupid.
Now we've got this threat of the gas and electric going up. How people are going to manage, I just don't know. There'll be so many more people getting their debts going up and up and up. It's obvious that there's going to be people that won't be putting the heating on this winter. They will be having to wrap up a bit warmer, whether or not they'll be able to cook for their kids or whether it'll be just sandwiches or cereal.
Average bills are going up to £100 a month, and more for those on prepayment meters. The price cap used to just be the backstop to prevent us getting totally ripped off by energy companies. And the advice was always that if you shopped around, you'd likely get a better deal. But not anymore. The price of wholesale gas has gone up so much this summer that lots of smaller providers have gone bust, and those that are still hanging on are charging us more. Even those on fixed deals will find it hard to get anything cheaper than the price cap when they come to renew. The regulator says they realise millions of customers will struggle, but energy companies say prices had to rise to cover their costs.
There's additional support as well for this period. And of course, there's existing schemes for vulnerable people. So I think it's very important that anyone watching this who's worried about their bill, particularly if they're vulnerable, gets in touch with their supplier to find out if they're eligible for that kind of support. But of course, we recognise it's a really difficult period.
The regulator Ofgem says it's striking the right balance between allowing companies to make a profit while keeping bills down for customers. But that's not how it feels in New Brighton. With universal credit being cut at the same moment and plenty of people still working from home, this huge jump in utility bills will be hard for everyone to swallow. Coletta Smith, BBC News on the Wirral.
Technical problems have hit the launch of Scotland's COVID vaccine passport app. The Scottish Government has suggested overwhelming demand may have been responsible. People now need proof they've had 2 jabs to enter nightclubs and other mass events, but some business owners say the added bureaucracy could put them out of business. Here's Lorna Gordon.
A packed gig in Dundee. From today, the law means punters will have to carry a COVID passport to get into big events.
You're comfortable with showing your vaccination status? Do you think it's a good idea, bad idea?
I think it's a good idea.
So I'm just going to end up getting it just because they're basically getting forced to get it, I think.
Enforcement won't kick in for more than 2 weeks, but nightclub owners believe the scheme is unworkable and warn some venues could fold.
We call it a passport to dance, and we've worked it out if we have like 1,000 people through the door, that takes 8 hours of check, and we only operate 5 hours, so it's just insane.
What does that mean for your business?
It's just impossible.
Scotland's COVID passport app was launched yesterday evening, just 12 hours before the scheme went live. Some people have found getting it to work straightforward, but a number of others have reported being kicked off while trying to register, or like me, are being told their details can't be found.
Some issues are being resolved. Largely, the issues are down to volume of traffic. The reason that we have, of course, delayed enforcement of the certification scheme is because we're allowing the scheme to bed in. So there's no reason at all that you should be turned away from an event or going out tonight or the football at the weekend.
Opposition parties say these technical problems and the soft launch underline that this is a scheme which they believe should have been binned before it started.
It came into force at 5 a.m. this morning. It will start to be used tonight, but it's not being in force for another 18 days. Shows that the Scottish Government know it's not ready. That's why they should have taken the opportunity to pause the whole scheme. I'd love it if they scrapped it. I think it's a wrong scheme. It's not going to do what they think it's going to do.
No other part of the UK is bringing in a scheme quite like Scotland's. The government here hopes it will encourage more young people to get double jabbed. But its introduction has proved politically controversial, beset by glitches and far from straightforward. Lorna Gordon, BBC News.
The government's latest coronavirus figures show there were over 35,500 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. There were 127 deaths reported. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. The latest figures on hospitalisations and the percentage of people vaccinated haven't been made available. Well, 1 in every 20 children of secondary school age in England is infected with coronavirus. That's according to the latest estimates from the Office for National Statistics. This is the highest reported rate for this age group or any other since the pandemic began. Our health editor Hugh Pym is here. Are these numbers a surprise? Are they a shock?
Well, Clive, it's further confirmation, actually, of the back-to-school effect going back to early September. Of course, in Scotland, schools went back in mid-August, cases went up, then started falling back, and the latest ONS infection survey, in fact, says that in Scotland last week, case rates fell, whereas they went up in England and Wales and were uncertain in Northern Ireland. And yes, that 11 to 15-year-old age group in England saw the highest infection rates and the biggest increases. There were increases as well amongst younger primary school children. Now, it is true that children very rarely get seriously ill with COVID. It's also the case that the 12 to 15-year-old vaccination programme has only just started rolling out, but we shouldn't forget children can develop longer-term consequences like long COVID, and the question now is, will these sort of increases spread further amongst local communities? There was better news today on the treatment of COVID, with the US drug manufacturer Merck announcing that a tablet it had developed for treating COVID had been so successful in trials that they were seeking emergency authorization. It's said to cut hospital admissions by 50%. But now it'll be up to regulators in the US and Europe and the UK to see whether it can be given the go-ahead.
Sure. OK, Hugh, many thanks. Hugh Pym there. The military will begin delivering petrol to garages across the country from Monday to help tackle the ongoing fuel crisis. Around 200 servicemen and women are receiving training at Hollyoaks sites because of a lack of tanker drivers. Well, our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus is at Westminster for us. Damien, is this a sign the situation isn't getting better as fast as the government hoped?
Clive, well, these drivers, 100 of them are actually drivers, as you say, will begin on Monday. And as well as that, what we've actually heard is that the government is going to make immediately 300 visas available for foreign drivers to be brought in by haulage companies to start pretty much straight away to help as well. Now, the government may be, I think, with this hoping to send a signal that it is trying to do everything it can to tackle the situation. These drivers have had taken time to be trained up and will then be helping. But the danger, I think, in this is that critics who say that there's a driver shortage because thousands of drivers left after Brexit and then it took time to train up more, will now point to the fact that the government is bringing in drivers from overseas and putting the army on the streets. in response to this crisis.
OK, Damien, thank you. Damien Grammaticus there at Westminster. With the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow a month away, many countries have stepped up their commitments to cut carbon emissions to slow global warming. However, Australia, one of the world's biggest coal producers, is accused of dragging its feet. This week, its Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, said he may not attend the summit. Australia's carbon emissions per person are among the highest in the world. It's promised to cut them by 28% by 2030, but that's less than most rich nations. And it hasn't agreed to deliver net zero emissions by 2050, a key summit target. From New South Wales, here's our correspondent, Shama Khalil.
Wow. The devastating bushfires less than 2 years ago were the starkest warning yet for Australians, experiencing firsthand the consequences of a warming planet. But Australia's commitments fall well behind other rich developed countries. In July, the UN ranked it last out of 170 member nations for its response to climate change.
Australia's record of reducing emissions stands above those who are claiming to achieve bigger things in the future but haven't achieved it to date.
Australia is the second biggest coal exporter in the world, and in the Hunter Valley, it's the bedrock of the economy. At Corrie Mining, they've been manufacturing coal mine drilling equipment for nearly 40 years.
We hear all the noise about going away from coal and we try to be ready to pivot, but we don't have a roadmap for that. We just don't know what is next, so we don't know how to do that. And it's incredibly difficult to turn your mind to that when you're in such a busy industry as we are now.
Despite the global urgency, climate change remains a divisive issue here in Australia. It draws in the powerful fossil fuel industry and regional voters, like the ones in this mining community, where an anti-coal message doesn't play well.
Without the coal mine industry, I wouldn't have a job.
It's been in my family for as long as I can remember.
Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull lost his job because of clashes over climate policy within his own party and its coalition partner, which is powerful in mining regions.
Right-wing politics has framed climate and the responses to climate as an identity or ideological issue. It's a combination of that plus the fossil fuel lobby and right-wing media. It has just been a toxic political battle for years.
With plenty of sun and wind, renewables are growing fast in Australia. This zinc refinery in North Queensland is one of the country's biggest users of electricity. With more than 1 million solar panels, it's now generating about a quarter of its power from the sun.
It is the right thing to do. It aligns us more closely with our customers, who are increasingly on an urgent mandate to decarbonise.
Even though it's on the front line of this environmental emergency, Australia is out of step with its allies when it comes to climate action, stuck in a balancing act between its domestic politics and its international reputation. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, the Hunter Valley.
Thousands of children are involved with criminal gangs in the UK, according to the police, and more than a third are girls. In the last decade, more and more have become caught up in gangs, often as a result of grooming or blackmail on social media. Some say their involvement can become life-threatening and lead to a range of mental health problems. With more, here's Amanda Curtin.
In cities across the UK, children are being exploited. Thousands of them end up joining gangs. Over a third are girls. We hear about the boys in the news. We see them on the streets. But the girls are hidden. Aaliyah was a gang member. She grew up in a difficult home.
So my mum met someone, a friend of a friend. He started coming to my house, and then his friend came. They ask you, can you hold this for me, please? And I'll give you some money. They want you to hold drugs or they want you to hold weapons. 3 floors of people selling drugs from my house and using my house as a trap house. Our life was basically, it was just survival mode at that point.
So home is not always a safe place.
Kendra was a gang member when she was just 12. She did what she had to do to survive.
By the age of 13, 14, these boys want to have sex. And so once I realised that if you brung them girls, that they wouldn't do stuff to you, by bringing other girls in, I'm protecting myself, or I think I am. I'm not, but at that moment, I feel like I'm protecting myself. When my man says that he chose that one, you have to go and tell that girl that's what time it is, or they will rape you. I haven't had a full night's sleep in years. I still dream about the victims that I created.
I started self-harming. I went through a few things. This was when I was like 13 to 14. I don't think I wanted to die. I just wanted to be free of the pain. Yeah, so it's like, it got worse. It was years, like a good 2-3 years of hurting myself. It took a long way to get out of that.
What every girl needs is, they need people to not give up on them. I was written off completely. I was that kid that you didn't want your kid to sit next to. I've gone on to achieve, I've got my own company, I'm educated, but I ain't forgot where I've come from. And what I do is make sure that I can do anything in my power to make sure that other girls feel the same way.
It was hard. I had my ups and downs. Then I found out I was pregnant, and she is my saviour. I'm a mum, I'm a mummy, I'm a mother. I've got a home, not a house. I work, I've got a part-time job, and I'm happy, and I'm in a better place.
Aaliyah and Kendra there speaking to our reporter Amanda Curtin. And you can see more on this on the BBC News channel and on iPlayer. The Green Party has elected 2 new leaders. Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey will share responsibilities after Jonathan Bartley stood down and Sian Berry chose not to seek re-election. Lava from an erupting volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma has reached the sea, creating vast clouds of steam and, it's feared, toxic gases. Many homes and crops have been destroyed and thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes since the eruptions first began 11 days ago. Well, our correspondent Dan Johnson joins us live now tonight from La Palma. Evening, Dan.
Good evening. Yes, that volcano is still really active and there is fresh lava flowing from new vents. There's an emergency team that's just driven up the road here with loudspeakers warning people that the wind direction has changed and that the sulphur levels are increasing in the air here, that people should go home and keep their windows closed. And this relentless eruption is not just affecting daily life here and people's livelihoods, it's actually changed the lay of the land. Welcome to the newest part of La Palma, a volcanic island extension that's growing all the time. And all this lava has destroyed 1,000 homes and forced thousands more to be abandoned. Emily and Augustine are the latest to pack up, ready to leave, fearful it's heading their way.
It won't stop. That's my one big fear, that we're only just seeing the beginning.
And there's Augustine's mum Fried and Aunt Maura, 96 and 97. They've both lived through 2 previous eruptions, 1949 and 1971. But now, they've had enough. This is much worse than the other eruptions, Fried says. I'll be much calmer when I reach the other island.
Everything's horrible. I mean, we're still lucky we have the house. We're counting. I mean, hope is always hopefully stronger than fear, but we hope it will stay. The people, I have so many friends who lost their houses and everything.
Round the clock, the lava keeps flowing, and new vents have opened up, threatening other villages. Ash is continually clouding these skies. So Janet's work is never done, because this volcanic grit just keeps falling.
It's not easy. We never imagined this could happen. It's hard to see people without anywhere to live. On this island, we are a family.
There's a huge exclusion zone being patrolled by the Coast Guard because although that's mostly steam being given off when the lava hits the water, there's also a risk toxic gases are released as well. And nobody knows how much more lava is going to flow into the sea. There's no sign of this ending anytime soon. Fishermen like Elian can only watch and wait. It's said the fish all swam away just before the eruption.
We don't know what the future will be like because there are fewer fish. I don't see a future here if they don't help us.
Do you think you'll leave La Palma?
Sí.
Others are adapting to this strange new way of life, dominated by the deep rumbling of the volcano and the unpredictable threat of its ever-flowing lava. Dan Johnson, BBC News, La Palma.
One of the UK's major sporting events is back this weekend, the London Marathon. Last year, COVID restrictions meant only elite runners took part on an enclosed circuit. Here's Joe Wilson.
Spring 2019, the old world. Nostalgia? Well, that London Marathon is back this Sunday, more or less. Competitors will be COVID tested, yes, and they'll start in staggered waves, but it's mass participation again. For the organisers, it's not just safe, it's inspiring.
Outdoors is the best place to be. Looking after your physical and mental health by taking exercise is the best thing to do for you, and it's just great to be here.
7 times the champion here, David Weir. David Weir agrees he was ready to retire after the Paralympics, but can't resist the London Marathon. He's back for yet more.
I just got this bug for it, and to, get on the start line in 2000 and still be here now, it's truly amazing.
And Weir will win once again in London. So 40,000 will try to get to the traditional finishing line here on the Mall. Another 40,000 will be competing wherever in the world life finds them, running the London Marathon virtually, for example, in Germany.
Hello guys, my name is Anas Al-Masri from Palestine. I'm training for a London Marathon.
He's part of the international refugee team.
I feel so happy because this is my favorite sport.
It's your favourite sport to run marathon, Anas?
Favorite sport, marathon. I feel so happy because, oh my God.
No, that's good. It's okay. It's good. It's very, very good. Well, sport is the world's language, isn't it? And more competitors than ever before, one way or another, one place or another, will be part of this London Marathon. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
That's it. Now on BBC One, time for the news where you are. Have a very good night.